Hi, I'm Malcolm Stern, and in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson from Online Events, we're creating a series of podcasts called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. My book of the same name was conceived and inspired by the suicide of my daughter Melissa and the journey that took me on and the internal resources that I found. All of my guests will have a story to tell around overcoming and ultimately thriving through adversity. Special thanks to the band Stairway, Jim McCarty and Louis Chinamo, for the use of theme music from their album Medicine Dance, and my engineer Owen Santiago. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening. Welcome to my podcast, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which I'm doing in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson at Online Events. And what we're exploring here are sometimes ordinary or extraordinary human beings, but all of us have a story to tell, and we have ways of overcoming adversity. So this series was dreamed up as a result of my own having to overcome adversity and what it took to do it. And I've interviewed more than 60 people so far to explore that. Today, my guest is an old friend, Caroline Bourne, and Caroline's a movement practitioner, and we're exploring her adversity, which has been how she's managed a disability with the creative process. So how she's managed to work with a disability. So Caroline, perhaps you could tell us something about that to start us off.
Sure. So I guess just to give a little foundation, I've been working with the body as a kind of conscious being, a part of us, for over 45 years with groups and individuals, working as a movement therapist and training, and also as a performer. So through that experience, I've understood that creative expression is very powerful to actually transform and change things in people. I've seen this, I've witnessed it. And when it's actually really embodied and grounded. So I'm doing less teaching now. And 34 years ago, I began to have a symptom, which was a contraction in my hands. And I just started working with it for myself as something, because I've always seen the body as something very wise in its own self, just as much, if not more, than the mind. It just has a different timing, a different biological timing, but actually it has its wisdom. So I was asking this symptom, why are you there? And I was doing that by a lot of movement work, artwork. And after about 20 years, I thought, wait a minute, this amount of material could begin to form a book, which is what I've been doing the last 6, 7 years. How I've done that is I want to just name my teacher and honor her, because there's a particular practice that I've used that's been sort of central to this whole process, is something called the life art process. And what it is through, when you move, you get in touch with your body, you get in touch with your emotions, you get in touch with your spirit. So the whole point of it is to get different levels of ourselves present. And then if you make an image from there, you take immediate drawing materials that are easy to use and just translate that somatic experience. There's a sort of somatic immediacy that then goes on to the page. Information can come out that can surprise our minds. So I've made 50 paintings and drawings of my hands in this way. So she called it the life art process. She called it kinetic visualization, the idea that from movement you go into visuals. So that's been the kind of backbone, and it's just been the most amazing process of learning. In a way, if I hadn't had this symptom, I probably wouldn't have, I wouldn't have increased the level of experience I've had with my own self through my body. The symptom has been a gift, for sure. Okay, it's not life-threatening, but
No, but I see that often that what we see as the place of adversity, the place of challenge, is the place where there's often room to grow and there's room to actually develop beyond who we thought we were, because we've had to find something outside of the tram lines. And
yeah,
obviously you've done that. You've done that with a a lot of effort and energy with life art, but also you're also writing about it, and you're a movement practitioner, so you're also working with it in quite an embodied way, presumably.
Yeah, I just want to read you a little bit that I wrote some time ago, which is about the challenge, how to put an embodied practice into words. So this is how I've been working. Is that okay? I'm just going to
Of
read
course,
it.
yeah, yeah, far away.
So it's a chapter on movement. If I only sit and write, I run the risk of coming from the mental level without the participation of my body. As being conscious in my body underpins this work, sometimes I show up to write and I feel like resting, which I do. Or I show up to write and I go and move instead. Making a commitment to my body means accepting its needs, its real needs, and not forcing it in another direction with the mind, the dominant way we all know. When I move, maybe all that shifts is a hand rotating, or my pelvis may offer a tiny sway. Small movements bring subtle awarenesses larger movements can't access. Alternatively, a fast and furious expressive dance brings discharge, vitality, and expansions. Between those extremes, any movement can arise. Sleep or just resting can bring an insight unavailable to my wide awake self. Each morning, I show up to move or write and see what happens. Instead of my mind being executor for my body and ordering to act, I listen to my body.
It's lovely. Well, that's obviously come from a deep place inside you, which is, you're actually writing about your own process, which also will sort of segue with other people's processes. And presumably, what you're wanting to do with the book is to help educate people to be able to use movement or whatever creative expression they have to make a shift in their own perspective.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I'm also aware my symptom, which I can describe, is not life threatening. Um, so basically, I can show you on Zoom, it's a contracture in my hands. So I can't open my hands. And it's progressive. And I only have two fingers on each hand that is normal, as it were. I can't lay my hands flat on a table. So maybe another reason I've been pulled by my body to relate to them is that they're in front of me every day. They're there. They're not an internal symptom.
And this sounds like a bit of a sort of a new agey sort of weird question, but it just came to me. Do you love your hands?
Well, that's the journey, Malcolm. That's the journey. I have hated them. I have hated them and I have loved them. So through this whole journey I've been on, this kind of weird, maybe like narcissistic journey, but I don't think it is actually. It's yeah, I've been through, like any relationship, I've been through all kinds of things. I've 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 certainly been furious with them. I've certainly felt abhorrence, and that's my journey. And I feel that that's all really important. All of that.
Funny because I feel like I could sort of, as you said, like any relationship, I feel like I'd actually transpose your hands to a partner. That sometimes we feel abhorrence and sometimes we feel fury, and there's a challenge to find our way underneath to what's genuinely possible within that frame before we give up because it all feels too hard. And presumably, well, you've been going for a long time with this now, and what have you discovered along the way? What's been the teaching with this?
Well, lots of teachings, and still like still coming up, which is amazing. So it's like a treasure chest. But obviously, my hands are not cut off at my wrist. My hands are an expression of my whole body. But in particular, I've really, really uh, searched into up my arms, my shoulders, my shoulder blades, my chest, my rib cage, my heart. And I've looked at the connection, which a lot of different disciplines talk about, the hands connected to the heart. In acupuncture, the little finger, which was the first finger to bend, is connected to the heart. But the thing that I discovered was huge rage in my shoulder blades. And it's through all this process that they showed me that. And that particular phase of work happened in lockdown. lockdown for me was the most incredible time of having a container to condense the work I was doing. And I discovered my shoulder blades just had such a strong voice. And of course, I'm sure you know that our shoulders carry a lot of responsibility and feelings and tension. So,
Well, yeah,
shoulder
having the
blades,
weight of the world on your shoulders is a
exactly,
common phrase.
exactly.
Yes.
So it was extraordinary to get such an specific and direct experience. And the dreams that came out of that were also very strong.
And that's
Yeah.
interesting because Jung calls dreams the royal road to the unconscious. And often we ignore our dreams or think we don't dream or can't make sense of them, but actually they're not delivered as a linear process. Our dreams, which is a big area of study for me and psychotherapy work I've been doing, are actually an incredible voice and a incredible resource. So tell me a little bit about your dreams.
Well, I'll tell you another dream. There was one then, but I want to tell you another one which came nearer the beginning when I've seen several surgeons and consultants, but I've decided not to go with them because, I want to listen to the message of my body, not cut it out. So one of them told me, well, it is genetically connected. And so I felt it was to do, and he agreed it was the mother line. So I did a ritual to clear my mother line. And while I was preparing for this ritual, I gave myself a year to prepare. I I had a dream that I was walking along a long, long path, and I met a lama at the end, a woman who was sitting there, and someone offered me a comfortable chair. I took a hard chair, but then this lama started telling us about her hands that through her spiritual practice had softened all the tendons. And it was such a lovely dream. It felt like an affirming of the ritual I was going to do. It was, I think, halfway through that year I had it, and it was with me a lot of the time. And then in the end, I enacted it and did it. My hands didn't soften, but there was a message there.
I was going to say that's not the point of the dream. We often think the dreams are literal and need to be
Yeah,
translated exactly as they are. But
yeah,
I'm hearing Lama, I'm hearing a sort of your own internal wisdom or reaching into a place of wisdom.
yeah,
And your hands may not have softened at a physical level, but something may have softened at a psychic level. Psychic is not the right word, but at a subconscious level as
yeah,
well, because this is your work. And that's what
exactly.
I find really interesting is that we get support for our work in the oddest places as well.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the dream I had after which was about 10 years later when I was in lockdown with my shoulder blades, was of a very vibrant, very young, live young man who needed to stand on my shoulder blades to perform. And it felt hard work, but it didn't feel wrong in the dream.
Yes.
And for me, that's going back to Jung, that's my anima. Uh, Anima, I always forget, is that the male is anima, isn't it?
I always get them mixed up.
Anyway, the
And
male
anyway,
male archetype inside me, um, feeling kind of like a new life force, which is what it felt like that work with my shoulder blades was doing. You
I
know,
was this young boy as well, new life force. So that's
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
this is an ongoing lifetime work
yeah,
on your hands, but also on more than that as well, I presume.
yeah, yeah.
So what
It's
is
like
your yeah.
a kind of, being a teacher facilitator gives us a sense of identity, and it's a way of developing our skills. But there's something about I've been the facilitator for my own process has somehow gone so much deeper for me, ultimately. Yeah. And yeah,
Yes. I think the more we overcome in ourselves, the better the teacher we are. I know when I was younger and a sort of a quite brash therapist who thought I knew a lot. It's not until I'd been through quite a lot of life experiences that it humbled me to some degree, where the teaching became more authentic rather and I think that's part of our process as well. It's part of the wisdom
Absolutely.
of aging.
Yeah. I don't have an impulse to facilitate, but I hope it comes. I'm not going to do it just because, I could. It feels like for me it has to come from an impulse of this is what I need to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I often think with groups, what I say without being too mystical about it all is that if I'm actually in tune, then the muse is with me, and so I'm hearing something similar with you. That's if it comes. So it's almost like if it comes from the larger the cosmic unconsciousness or cosmic consciousness as well.
Oh, yeah, I really resonate with that. Yeah, I do feel I feel like there's been a lot of invisible support for this process I've been in. Massive, you know,
Yes,
massive. And yeah, I just loved it. And it's like every time I return to it, I feel so much pleasure. Well, it's not quite the right word, so much interest, and meaning. It just seems to give back to me so much. Yeah.
yes. And I think that's something that this is the theme of this series is very much that we're exploring how our adversity does give back to us as well, even though it's at the time. I think about the events in my life that have been particularly painful, difficult, challenging. And at the time, you go, you don't want them. But actually, years on, often there's a sort of a recognition that they've actually had some real value for you. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I actually, I mean, I've tried so many things and I recount all that, but at one point I find online a guy who claims to heal this particular symptom, and I pay him quite a lot of money, and I receive this distant healing. And two things came out of that. Nothing happened to my hands, but I felt a feeling of belief that it could change.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes.
And just the feeling of possibility was worth paying that money. It may seem strange, but you know,
No, I understand. I think we often think of healing as removing the symptoms, removing the problem,
yeah,
whereas actually it feels much deeper that the whole process of genuine healing of ourselves as human beings is a very deep process and
yeah,
often will involve years and years of exploration and experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curing is usually one single action. And,
Yes.
most people have surgery for this symptom, but it can come back. And I know it can come back. So it's like, why would I do that when my body's a messenger?
Yes. Yes. It sort of reminds me as we're talking about Stephen Levine, who you probably know, I'm sure, who wrote
Yeah,
books on death and dying, and he used to say that when people were dying, the healing wasn't necessarily that they would get better, but that
mm,
something would unravel or something would mutate within themselves that
yeah,
would take them into a different space. So I think we're exploring that as we explore um, the whole process of consciousness in our times as well.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely that. I mean, I don't think my hands will kill me. They may turn into fists, and of course, that's been a fear I've worked with. But I can say that they've stopped progressing in the last 5 years. So
So
something's,
that's it. So it's a progressive condition that stopped progressing.
yeah,
So something is taking place.
something is taking place.
And
Yeah.
slightly sort of jocularly, I sort of thought, well, you could always still become a professional boxer if you wanted.
You're not the first person to have
Oh,
said
really? Okay. Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
interesting because, there are some people, as I can't remember their names now, but I quote them, a couple of German people who write about the healing something of illness. And they say anything when the hands are turning in, it means anger. And I don't agree it's that straightforward.
no, it's not.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's too simplest.
It is too simple. I think we often go for simplifying things when actually there's a process to be gone through. You can't go that equals that, therefore
Yeah,
it's living it, feeling it, growing with it. And I think what you've said about the hands not the condition not progressing further in the last few years
yeah,
is relevant as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it feels extraordinary in a way that's happened. And the funny thing is I didn't even notice it was happening because I was sort of attached to change. And it's like, oh, no change. That's what's changed. You know.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
uh, so where do you're writing your book on this, and this has been
yeah,
a process of your own journey and own exploration, and your understanding of the possibility of creativity affecting
yeah.
disability or difficulty. Where do you go from here? What's your trajectory forwards?
Hmm. Well, I guess I want to see the book in the world, you know, out in the world. That's one thing. Um, yeah. And as I said, I'm not sure if I will teach, but I have a kind of inkling that what may come to me is wanting to offer work for people that does look at how to work creatively with a symptom.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I know that after my daughter died, my and I wouldn't have said, "Oh, that's good. I'll trade that for that." It's nothing like that. But I know that something deepened in me,
Yeah.
and it affected and impacted how I was with other people. And it's almost like it's much more subtle than that
Yeah.
happens. Therefore, you get this and you go there. But subtly, we're being molded, I believe,
Mm.
by our struggle, our challenge, and our work with adversity.
Mm.
And it
And I
feels,
actually do think that aging is part of supports that, you know, that the aging process brings just more time of experience and learning, you know, just very
yeah.
simply.
And less drive towards the distractions of our youth, sort of
Mm.
for me, obviously sexuality is something when I was young and when we are young, we're driven by a very different drivers that take
Sure.
us to different places. And actually, I notice now as I'm aging, I'm in my mid 70s now, and I notice that actually I don't want drama anymore. I used to have my relationships used to be full of drama and wildness. Actually, I love peace, and that sounds very sort of soft, but it actually feels quite deep as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, I completely go along with that. And I think, you know, when I first had this little finger and I describe in the book, I'm teaching and I talk about a very simple movement process where you lift your shoulders, then you raise your elbows towards the ceiling and the backs of your wrists, and then all fingers. And someone in the class was trying to just raise nine of hers, as mine were only nine then. And I felt so ashamed and yeah, inadequate that my body, which had been pretty perfect, you know, all the bits of it pretty perfect to that point, no longer was.
Yeah,
And and so that was a kind of real hit that, you know, my ego as a young facilitator liked to know my body was perfect and it wasn't anymore.
yeah, that's right.
It's quite a journey.
Yes. So your body is now doing what your body does, but you're practicing consciousness around your process, and as you
Absolutely.
probably have done forever. So it deepens as we age as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like we're talking about, you mentioned cosmic uh, influence, or and certainly spirituality is really connected with this. And I said I feel like there's been an unseen um, kind of say protection, but it's more support around this
oh,
whole
it's nice actually. Yeah.
project, you know. And I realize that I'm a little bit embarrassed about naming that whole area because sometimes the guidance I receive is very specific, you know, and my rational mind can easily go, oh, for God's sake, you know. But actually, I'm learning now to put that aside and trust more and more the guidance, you know.
Well, I think we walk quite a fine line between, especially in the world that you and I both inhabit, of the consciousness raising and human development. Um, we walk a fine line between what John Welwood called spiritual bypassing and a
Mm,
deep connection to our spirituality. Now, a deep connection to our spirituality often doesn't talk about the process of that deep connection.
Mm.
I remember talking to Dina Glauberman once about Skiros and saying, well, none of your blurbs, mentioned spirituality. And she said, I like it to be between the lines. And I thought that was very good. That actually, I
Yeah.
think we are truly functioning from an inspired place. We
Mm.
don't need to go, the forces of the cosmos are with me and blah, blah, blah. We
Mm.
accept that that's part of the nature of life.
Mm. Well, I would say a little bit more than that because I think sometimes the guidance is very specific and wants to be named. I've been writing for guidance most days recently, and asking questions, and the answers are just, and anyone can do this. It's just about opening your mind to that, and the answers are extraordinary. Like helping me in my life. So I think I feel like people can name this now, not just keep it subtle, because I think why not?
But I still think that the danger is that we sort of like we think we're special.
Sure.
We want
Yeah.
to put a cosmic fix on everything and not accept that we are human beings and having to sort of go through this human journey. I was just thinking as you were speaking about the I Ching or the I Ching, which I've used for guidance for 40 years.
Sure.
And on the face of it, I'm throwing three coins six times and drawing up hexagrams. And what the hell has that got to do with anything? But actually, the source of it in the West was that Jung brought it across. That actually Confucius, apparently at the age of 70, said he was starting to grasp the rudimentaries of it. And I think there is guidance in many ways. Again, we have to watch between the newspaper astrology and the sort of deep astrological understanding, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an interesting subject. That actually, what I'm hearing is that you do get guidance. You're not ashamed of getting guidance, and
Exactly.
sometimes you'll name that guidance because that's what
Yeah,
is
that's right.
inspired.
And I think the bypassing thing is very strong in our culture, but because working somatically with my body means staying with all the feelings as well. It can't not. And
Yeah,
therefore I don't bypass. It's
very
just
good,
I
very good.
might have in the past, but no longer.
No, no,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. I certainly did in the past. I hope I don't now. So that's there. All right. Well, we're coming towards the end of our podcast, and the question I always ask at the end is, what is the particular dragon you've had to slay? What's the hurdle you've had to overcome in order to be who you are and to do what you do?
Yeah, I think when I was a facilitator, there definitely was, I was successful and that fed my ego. And I've realized over the years that that was covering feelings of insecurity, feelings I wasn't really that good.
Yeah.
And I guess doing this whole practice, this whole project, more of a project, it's brought me into a relationship with myself that has kind of had to meet those places.
Yes.
Because I'm not, that thing of having an identity. Well, you may not know this because you still have a professional identity. I don't have much of a professional identity. So I've had to kind of look, who am I without a role?
Yes. I've often thought about that actually. I thought, who would I be
Yeah,
without my?
yeah. And it's not easy. And I see my friends, retiring and, struggling at times with that.
Totally get it. Yes.
And people who don't retire. So, I don't know why I stopped doing so much teaching. It just kind of faded away. And maybe my psyche needed to just face me with the feeling of inadequacy
Mm,
without a role.
mm. That's lovely. Thank you for a very authentic and honest interview as well. And it's really good to see you, Caroline. So
Yeah. Thank you,
sometime soon.
Martin. Thank you.